Great. So let's get started with my agenda for today. Firstly, good evening, people of India, and good morning, people from America and other parts of the world. Welcome to my series of conversations with stalwarts in the world of music. The introduction today perhaps should be refined to say that our guest today epitomizes the highest degree of blues, rock, and jazz music traditions for several years now. He's a distinguished guitar virtuoso with an unparalleled vocabulary in blues, rock, and jazz music. He's renowned today as one of world's greatest guitar players of all time. He was born in a musical family at Woodlake, California. He took up saxophone at the age of 10 and picked up the guitar much later. At an early age of 18, he was hired to play with Charlie Musselwhite, putting out two phenomenal blues albums, and then later he joined forces with a jazz fusion band by the name LA Express. He's also known for his contributions with the Yellow Jackets, the Sunday Night Band featuring Marcus Miller, J.T. Lewis, and topping it off with 5 Grammy nominations. This is quite unbelievable indeed. He's considered to be one among the top 100 guitarists of this century. Without any further ado, I'm delighted to welcome my guest for today, Mr. Robben Ford. Hello, how are you?
Hey, I'm fine. How are you?
Very well, very well. Thank you so much for taking time this early in the morning and making this happen.
You're
Couldn't
welcome.
have,
I was up.
couldn't, couldn't be better.
Well, thank you. I'm looking at the screen and I see all of the messages across my face. Is that the way it is?
Yes, that's how Instagram Live usually is, right? So,
For me. Okay,
uh-huh.
good enough.
Great. So let's get started with our agenda for today. Uh, so, Mr. Ford, if I were to go back in time, turn the clock back, and I came to you and said I want to learn music from you, what is it that you would be looking for in a potential musician who really hasn't had any kind of formal training or introduction to music? What are the qualities that you'd identify in a potential musician?
Well, I think if someone really is a potential musician,
Mm-hmm,
they will they'll learn quickly,
mm-hmm,
and you can kind of tell that. That's if
sure.
someone is able to pick up on, what you're saying, what you're showing them,
Mm-hmm.
because I know what the opposite side of that is. I've said to people, put your first finger on the first string on the third fret, and they still don't know what you're talking about with the guitar.
Sure.
So generally, a potential musician kind of learns things quickly.
Mm-hmm.
They have a natural, inclination.
Right. Right. So when you sing certain songs, I'm a huge fan of your singing as well. The great quality of your singing is almost lovingly, and you do it with a lot of charis. You sort of feel the words when you sing it. How conscious a process is that? You've been through several great masters, I'm sure. Each person has different styles, and how have you developed your impeccable quality in terms of singing?
Well, thank you for that. I always sang,
Hmm.
even in the early grade school, like early
Okay.
bands when I was 13, 14. I was always the singer. But I think the main thing that I have always been able to do is uh, be in tune.
Sure.
And so, that's a good start. I never had a lot of voice,
Hmm.
and I've actually, studied with a few different people,
Okay.
which I think is, well, it was certainly necessary for me I don't think Aretha Franklin ever took a vocal lesson, but I needed it.
True.
And so because of my limitations, I would say, I had to be very sincere.
Okay.
I had to really be honest and really just present myself with what I have, here I am, this is how I do it. So, it requires a certain amount of bravery, to, be at all times willing to expose your limitations.
Right.
And so over time, I really came to know my voice. I came to know my limitations, so you start putting things in the right key. This is very important,
Right.
Keys are very important for singers to present songs. So it really was a very slow process for me. And I'm still working on it, really, like certain things I'm more suited to sing than others. And so I shouldn't sing those things that I'm not suited to sing, So it's just a refining process, and a lot of it, I would say, both for myself as a vocalist, but even as a guitar player, it's, like really kind of finding the things that you do best, focusing on them, and then trying to, work within your limitations, actually. That's not a bad piece of advice. We all want to be the best, but,
I'm
maybe
definitely
you can
going
just
to
be the
take
best
that.
you.
Yeah. True. You have been a musician who has worked your way through, achieved a lot of milestones, right? How important are honors and recognitions or good reviews, write-ups in the press? I'm sure the pure musician in you would definitely need some kind of gratification to the job that you're really doing well. All these must come useful in some or the other way. So what is your take on this?
Well, no one likes to get bad reviews, of course.
Right.
I have a tendency to avoid reviews. Like I really don't read them because, I don't want to know. And it's, people showing up to your concerts, that's what really matters,
True that.
And if there are people showing up and they're happy and enjoying it, that makes it all worthwhile. And yeah, it is important to get positive feedback for sure.
Right.
But I think I've always been, I think I'm easily hurt, actually, by negative comments. And so I just kind of avoid the whole thing.
Right.
So that I don't have to go through that emotional upheaval. But these days, it's been quite gratifying because with things like Instagram, where you're able to communicate directly with your audience, it's you're not being reviewed by some dude or some woman who maybe didn't like it. Who cares? This one person, and they're influential. So I was like, I'll just pass on that, and I'll see how people respond when they come to my show.
Talking about the whole recording process, what is generally more satisfying to you? Is it working on a nice recording that can be crafted and probably good to listen to, something that's frozen in time, or would it be a live performance like you mentioned earlier?
Well, everything has its place. There's nothing like playing. It can't be, there's just nothing like actually playing with good musicians in front of people. That feeling, it isn't the experience in the studio. I love working in the studio, but it's sort of it's a little painstaking. I mean, you have to redo things. You have to really work on things. It's a lot more work than the live performances. And the
Sure.
live performance just puts everything together, you know.
True.
That's it, you know, that's kind of why we do this, you know, to a great extent. I mean, I'm not a hobbyist. It's, as, of course, you know, as you know, uh, it's really kind of my life, you know. So when you're in front of people and playing with other musicians, that certainly has the most potential for satisfaction, you know, on a personal level. But I will say this, you know, as
Mm-hmm.
well. As far as, being like music for me, it's like I'm just as happy sitting and listening to great music live as I am
Sure.
playing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also just as happy being in the producer's chair on the other side of the glass rather than being one of the musicians out there.
Yeah.
It's very holistic, you know, it all is it is all an expression of making music, producing music in the moment, you know, or listening to it in the moment. It's like, great. My favorite thing to do has always been to sit in a club
Mm-hmm.
with friends, watching my favorite artists perform. Like
Okay.
I just as soon do that as play, you know, for sure. It's
Right.
just as enriching and fulfilling, you know.
I mean, there's no greater pleasure than sort of appreciating someone else's music too.
Yeah,
That's a whole lot of
you
fun.
forget
Yeah,
yourself, you know. You're just
totally,
in that.
totally. When one says internalize the music or make it part of your system, sort of imbibe it, what do
Yeah.
you really mean by that? Like, I've been trying to get an insight to the distinction between the physical practice of learning a certain note, or say you're trying to train yourself in terms of learning a couple of guitar scales.
Mm.
There's, of course, this internalization which precedes expression. How does one work on this internalization process?
I would say that it comes from, um, it's like, you know, loving it
Mm-hmm.
and also taking every little aspect, you know, like if you learn a chord,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that chord isn't just like a building block, you know, it's not
Sure.
a chunk of
Mm-hmm.
all of the things that you have to learn, you know.
Right.
It's it's a beautiful thing right there in itself, and you just love playing that chord, you know.
True.
Or you know, scales, like people think that, you know, they learn a scale so that they can play music, but
Mm-hmm.
actually a scale is music,
Right.
and just like playing that scale should be just as cool as playing anything else, you know. And it should feel that
Right.
way to you, like everything is, it's all musical, like you're instantly, it's
Yeah.
music right now, it's not
Mm-hmm.
music later after you learn these things.
True.
So every one of these aspects, little things in music, chords, scales, you know, learning a melody, all of those
Mm-hmm.
things, that's it, you know.
Okay.
Every single aspect of it is music, you know, right now.
Yeah. I kind of agree with you on that.
Hmm.
Uh, you did mention about playing in front of audiences and getting a lot of joy doing so, right? So, is
Yeah.
there some sort of fear in the process of unfolding the present, particularly before an audience, when things go wrong? Say, if you're sort of like planning it out, if you were to like forget your next move, in what way do you carry the memory of instructions to go to the next particular move? Because it's so structured. How do you sort of do that? How do you sort of have that in your memory as to what needs to be done next in front of when you're playing in front of a huge audience?
Well, um, I can tell you this, like I keep my music simple
Hmm.
for one thing,
Okay.
and you know, I have a pretty good memory, you know,
Okay.
and you know, so there are those fundamental things, you know, like I I know what we're playing. I know how it goes. You know, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to forget.
Mm-hmm.
Again, partially because I think I keep the music simple. You know, why would I make it so difficult that I didn't enjoy myself or feel comfortable? But
Sure.
then there's the special sauce. You know, for me, is actually being willing to make a mistake. You know,
Right.
like that's included, and it's one of the beautiful things. You know, that exists in, you know, most, you know, kind of like I consider, you know, I'm largely a blues player. It's kind of a folk music, and it
Mm-hmm.
actually incorporates mistakes.
Right.
Mistakes are actually a part of it. I mean, they just are. I've never heard perfection, you know, uh, exactly. You know, I mean, that's not really true. I mean, there beautiful things happen like that. But anyway, it's like, you know, when mistakes are made, it's you almost enjoy it.
Right.
It's funny, you know. There's humor in that, and I think the audience likes it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like when you include that kind of thing, when it's all included. You know, you can make mistakes. You know, things can kind of go wrong. You're emotionally prepared for that
Mm-hmm.
as a part of the whole thing. You know.
Sure.
So that's how I've always worked with it. It's like you just move on, you know, and and I think audiences like it. I'll tell
Right.
you a little story,
Mm-hmm.
and it's true. It's actually a true story.
Okay.
Um, Otis Redding, when he played at Monterey Pop Festival, so that was 1968, I think,
Okay.
and Otis was just sort of starting to get pretty well known and having some success. And he was backstage before the concert, and he was smoking a joint. And his manager was like, came up to him, and he's like, Otis, man, you know, this is Monterey Pop. This could be really great. You know, we really want to make this, you know, special, you know.
Right.
And
Right.
Otis Redding said, oh, man, it ain't nothing but a barn dance. You know, so people are just people.
True.
They're not this like super critical force in front of you expecting perfection. So you can
Sure.
kind of relax and share all of that with the audience, and I think they dig it.
Mm-hmm. At speaking of performance, at what point does the performance begin for you? Is it from the very first note that you play? How do you sort of exclude all of the external intrusions, perhaps?
I try to be alone, you know,
Okay.
for about a half an hour before the show. I always
Mm-hmm.
warm up my voice.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that kind of requires me being by myself. So I always hope to be able to do that, you know, spend time, you know, just warming up my voice, play the guitar a little bit, but not too much. But I do like having space, you know, some space, you know, before a show.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, you want to relax your nerves, you know, kind of settle in. Okay, we walk out there and you feel, you know, relaxed and prepared for the moment.
Right. So when you're preparing for a concert, for this feeling to be communicated, how important is your own state of mind? You being a performer, having a performance at say 4 in the noon, and you're affected by something very unpleasant, right? Say at 3 o'clock, like right before your performance. Would you be able to still deliver a virtuoso performance? Are you able to sort of keep the performance separate from the individual? Like, how difficult is it for you to separate that?
Well, I'm told that I do a good job of it.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean, if you're upset, and you have to work with that. But people tell me that I do a pretty good job.
Okay.
I only know from their side telling me, because I can be really, things do happen that are quite upsetting sometimes,
Hmm.
especially, I mean, you can do an entire performance where you're dealing with a terrible sound system or a terrible amplifier, and
Right.
you have to play in front of people.
Hmm.
That is awful. And so I'm told that I do a good job of it. That's really all I can say, because I
Hmm.
can be upset through an entire performance,
Right.
but you got to do your job. People showed up
True.
to see a play. You got to do your job. Got to
True.
be a
True that.
professional.
Yeah. You also have had very rich musical heritage, right? You have a lot of them in your family have been involved in music from a very young age.
Mhm.
How important is it to have music in your blood? Can it be taught and learned if it's not in your blood?
Hmm. Well, that's the $64,000 question, as they say. you know, and I don't think anyone really knows
Hmm.
that a real answer to that exactly.
Hmm.
But I personally feel that anyone can do anything,
Okay.
and but if you're starting at the beginning, you're starting at the beginning, and it might take a
That's right.
long time. And from my point of view, it might take lifetimes.
Hmm.
you know, you got to start somewhere, so you might as well start now. You know,
Right.
and I really do believe that anyone can do anything. I do. I believe that. It's just that, if you look at B.B. King and you look at John McLaughlin,
Sure.
wow. I mean, John McLaughlin can play super rings around, B.B. King,
Hmm.
but B.B. King is delivering something that the rest of us can't touch. You know, it's simple and it's beautiful. So that's how I mean that. It's like, yeah, when you really get down to it,
Hmm.
everything is an expression of some kind of deep feeling, desire, love, creativity. Nobody owns those things, man.
I agree with you. Yeah. Beyond musical performance itself, it's naturally, it sort of gets modified as we evolve, right? Like through several centuries, we have a lot of changes in terms of the technology, the lighting, the stage, but it's more of the cultural environment. When I say the cultural environment, of course, I mean tastes in terms of the audience, right? They also tend to change, right?
Uh-huh.
So even when it comes to musicians, there's a great deal of PR relations, musical promotions. There's also great pressure involved for a musician to deliver, and also a lot of things to worry about, like sponsorship, and someone who'd probably want to sign them. So there are a wide range of issues that demand a lot of attention.
Yeah.
Uh, but that being said, if one's good work is to be noticed, do you resent that?
Resent it?
Yes.
All of those pressures?
Yes. Yes.
Um, I was very fortunate, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um,
Okay.
I uh, I had some really, big breaks at a very early age.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that was a surprise to me to find myself, in a situation that was very high, at a very early age.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so then everything went down,
Okay.
and I was struggling, having had really great success at an early age. And then things started going up again, you know. So it's been like that my whole career. Um, it's been up and down, up and down, up and down. And of course, you want everything to go smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
And it does for some people, you know, I mean,
Right.
at least in terms of, you know, having early success that continues throughout their whole life, you know, like the Rolling Stones or something like that. No problem, man, you know, since they were kids. So it's just, you know, it's one's karma, all of these things, you know, and you can't resent it. And personally, you know, all of these things can be worked with. Some people are better at it than others, you know, and sometimes it takes you a long time to really figure out what's necessary to navigate a career, because you're an artist and you expect everyone to just come to you, you know, and give you lots of money and say you're great. It just doesn't work like that. Or it does, you know. Again, it has worked like that for some people, but, you know, a musician, you know, needs to be strong, and you need to be smart.
True.
And it's always nice to have some help, you know, along the way. Find people who you trust and like, you know, who can help you. You know, all of these things, they seem to be just, it's all, you know, it takes a long time to learn for some of us. It did for me, how to navigate, you know,
Right.
a professional career. And sure, I resent a lot of things, but it doesn't help, you know, so you
Yes.
need to, you know, just kind of man up, you know, or woman up and do what's necessary. You got to do what you got to do. I can say one thing though that I do believe is true, is that if you serve the art,
Mm-hmm.
everything will be okay.
True.
You know, whatever the art is, if you just serve the art and kind of be open, you know. You know, some people get very successful, some people get just a little, some people in the middle. It's just life, you know.
Talking about success, when did you sort of feel the eureka moment in you that I feel a sense of accomplishment doing so
You mean personally or professionally?
professionally in terms of music?
Yeah, professionally, as I say, it's been up and down, you know. I mean, I thought I was going to be rich and famous forever when I was 21, 22. It just seemed like, of course, that will happen, you know. And great things happened, and then it went down, and, you know, you can doubt yourself even as a, you know, I mean, as a player, I always felt pretty good about my
Mm-hmm.
ability personally, you know, my ability, but it doesn't necessarily translate into, you know, uh, a career if you don't have a firm direction, you know, like that's the trusting the art thing, you know. So I think by my 30s, when I got into my 30s, and especially into my 40s, I felt like I'm going to be okay. You know, whatever happens, I'm going to be able to record, play in front of people. You know, it'll be all right. But you know, doesn't mean you don't go through other hard times. You know, where you're not
Yeah.
working, you're not making money, you're not quite sure. I, I I've gone through a lot of that. You know, so you know, once again, I think the important thing is to keep your eye on the music. You know.
Sure. Music is so much of an expression of one's personality, and it could be one's soul, it could be the kind of person you are. It's a very simple question, but does it require to be a good human being to make good music?
Well, apparently not. But at the same time, maybe so. you know, um, you know, real I think everybody's basically a good person. You know, they just have problems. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? But it's really interesting. Like Miles Davis.
Mhm.
Wow. I mean, man, that's a complicated situation there. You
True.
know, uh, made incredible music. You know, um, became super famous, super influential. He's probably the most revered artist in jazz. You know,
True.
incredible. But you know, I mean, he was a good person sometimes, maybe not such a good person sometimes. I don't know. It's complicated, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Some of my favorite tracks are from your album Supernatural. If I remember well,
Well,
there's
thank
If,
you.
there's Don't Lose Your Faith in Me.
Yeah,
So this is lovely string arrangement in them.
yeah.
So for the fans of India and for the people from the rest of the world, would we be able to see you perform with a Philharmonic Orchestra any time in the near future?
Probably not. I'm actually speaking with a good friend of mine. He's a very well-known composer, film score person. He
Mhm.
does work with symphonies. He's French,
Oh, wow.
and he and I were. He approached me about maybe doing something like that in
Mhm.
France,
Mhm.
and I'm. I believe that I'm moving to France this year.
Wow.
Yeah, and so
Have you learned French yet?
uh, not really. No,
Okay.
I've studied it
All
for
right.
years, but you know, in
Okay.
order to speak, you have to live there. You
True.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to it.
Lovely.
But this would be the only situation where, for the first time, really, that I've been invited, you know, to do something like this. I've
Mhm.
worked with big bands, you
Mhm.
know, but a philharmonic orchestra, I haven't done that. So this is the first offer that I've had of this type, and
Mhm.
it might happen, you know, it could.
We'd be really looking forward to that.
Well,
A
thank
lot
you.
of fans from India. We have some great talent from India. We have Mr. Ehsan Nurani who's tuned in, and we have Oranjoy Sarkar, who's yet another lovely blues player. And then
Yeah.
we have yeah, some great musicians who admire your work.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So there's another question from the fans. Would they be able to see a reunion tour of the Robben 4 and the Blue Line again?
Well, you never know for sure, but you know, I would have said no, uh, but I don't know if you're aware of this record that's being released.
Hmm.
Uh, a British record company called Repertoire Records is
Okay.
releasing live recording. Are you
Oh,
familiar with
wow.
that?
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Okay. Yeah, it's the Blue Line live in 1996.
Oh,
And these tapes from a 5 night stint at a club called Yoshi's in Oakland, California. We
hmm,
recorded 2 shows a night. And so there were 10 shows. And my co producer of my last record, Pure,
hmm.
and the previous one, Purple House, uh, we went through all of them, chose the best performances, and mixed it. And it's actually being released the end of this month. It's
Oh,
Robben
wow.
Ford and the Blue Line live at Yoshi's.
Yoshi's.
Yoshi's, yeah. And Repertoire Records. That's the record company. So keep an eye out for that. And
Sure thing.
I have a feeling that people are really going to be excited about it. I
I'm
am.
already
And the
excited.
band just sounds fantastic, you know? So it's really good.
Sure. Lovely. Lovely. Could you give us, or could you share some anecdotes from your touring experiences, something noteworthy that you'd like to share with our viewers here?
Wow. It's been a long career, man,
No, but a few interesting experiences that are worth sharing out here.
Well, uh, again, there's a lot to pull from there, but the first thing that came into my mind was I did a tour of Europe with a band that was called Miles Smiles.
Mm-hmm.
And this band was a group of musicians, all of whom had worked with Miles Davis.
Okay.
And we played the music of Miles Davis. And
Wow.
it's actually, you can find it on YouTube. There's
Okay.
a couple of shows that are up. The band was Omar Hakim on drums, Daryl Jones on bass, Joey DiFrancesco on organ, Wallace Roney on trumpet, Rick Margitza on tenor saxophone, and myself on guitar. And I just have to say that I think it was 2015, maybe 2013 when we did this. 2013, maybe. But Miles Smiles with this group. And it was, for me, I think that was the most really thoroughly enjoyable group and kind of music maybe that I've ever done, because it was Miles Davis's music, and Miles is my probably greatest musical inspiration and influence,
Right.
And all of those guys has had the same experience of working with him, So, and all of us loved Miles's music and knew the vibe. So we were able to create it, I dare say. And, because we all knew what it felt like to play with him. So I felt that we actually brought it, like even without him being there, the spirit was there.
Sure.
And I felt like we actually really recreated the whole experience of what it was like to see him. And I get, kind of welled up even thinking about it. It was beautiful. And there's one particular concert that is available. There's two or three, but there's one in particular, and it's the North Sea Jazz Festival.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and that was a great experience for me. Working with that band. Of course, when I was invited to join Joni Mitchell, I was 22 years old, and for the first time, I was playing with musicians who were all very evolved, great players, So that was a big jump, from playing with my brothers and my buddies, in empty clubs, to suddenly, I'm playing with great musicians, who became, very good friends and really helped me learn on their time. That is the best thing that a musician can experience, is to, be around musicians who are way more evolved than they are. And that's where you really learn,
Sure.
is playing with people who are way more involved than you are. And it's kind of a rare, it doesn't happen to everyone necessarily,
Right.
So, I can't say enough about that experience, to finally be able to, I was 22, I was a kid. And here I am playing with people who have worked with Oliver Nelson and Sonny Rollins and, Thelonious Monk and Frank Zappa and, all these people. Just incredible. So those two things are kind of the most outstanding experiences, I would say, for me.
So what remains for you now? You've achieved technical excellence to sort of surrender to the bubble of sound and encase yourself in it. You yourself are very accomplished, as you mentioned. You work with some of the finest musicians in the world. What remains for you now?
Well, it seems to be true that everything goes in circles or cycles, you know, like full circle. You kind of come back to where you started.
Mm-hmm.
And my musical interests have come right back to where I started. Not the blues per se, you know, but you know, blues is where I cut my teeth. That's where I learned how to play the guitar, was playing blues music. And but when I started to sort of, you know, I wanted to better myself and become a better musician, to learn more, it was jazz. And I used to listen to a lot of the Blue Note records. Wayne Shorter is a big hero of mine. But I listened to a ton of Blue Note records. You know what I'm talking about, right?
That's
the
right.
jazz label.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
They also have
that
a
music,
performance venue, don't they?
pardon?
They also have a Blue Note performance venue also, right? In New York.
There became, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that exists in New York and a few
yeah,
places, you know, in the world.
yeah.
So, but the records, you know, that I'm referring to in particular, you know, came out of the 60s. So
Okay.
the 60s is sort of what my musical period, you know, where I really formed my own musical kind of loves, which grew over time, but that's really where I come from. And so over the last couple of years, you know, my last record called Pure is an instrumental album. And prior to making Pure, I was producing instrumental records. So I've been writing in an instrumental way and playing, and the guitar, like more about the guitar than about songwriting and singing. And so this is what I'm doing right now. I'm actually working on music that's similar, you know, to that kind of Blue Note period.
Okay.
And I'm hoping to record it. I'm hoping to get together a group of musicians like Omar Hakim, you know, Kenny Garrett, Robbie Coltrane, you know, James Genus, you know, like the great jazz players today,
Okay.
who also can play kind of anything. You know, they can
Right.
play funk, they can play rock if you want it, you know. So versatile musicians who share this same, you know, love of that period of music and can really play it. I'd like to do something with that. That's what's on the front burner for me right now, and we'll see where it goes. But it's really about guitar playing and composing, you know, writing instrumental music.
Right. There's definitely something very mystical about music. Does that sort of create a proclivity of interest in a few other aspects, part of the mystical for you?
Oh, very. Yeah.
Could you throw some light on that?
Well, you know, it's kind of impossible. You know, music is kind of impossible. And I know that, excuse me, when I'm playing, there are times when I'm just like, I don't know how this is happening. I really don't. How could this possibly be happening? I don't know where it comes from. You know, I mean, you know, you train, you know, like you would train in anything, you know, like you would train in martial arts or yoga or meditation. You know, you train, you just apply yourself. And then somehow it seems like this thing is going on that, you know, is absolutely, you know, impossible. It's impossible, you know. It all comes out of training, but then it becomes mystical, you know, and you're like, you really don't know how that happens, how you're doing this. It's really true. And I mean, musicians, and I'm not one of them, but, you know, I must say I'm a big fan of Indian music. My
Oh,
girlfriend and I
wow.
listen to it a lot. And especially those people. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm a big fan of, are you familiar with Ram Narayan?
Not really.
He plays, I can never remember the name of the instrument, but it's like four strings, I think. It's held in the lap like this. It's played with a bow.
The sarod? Sarod? Are you talking about the
Not
sarod?
sarod.
Okay.
I can never remember it.
Okay.
But in any
Okay.
case, you know, for me, like Indian music, that's where you really hear the impossible.
Yeah, I think it's the sarangi.
That's it.
Someone said, yeah, the sarangi. Okay.
Yeah. And this guy, Ram Narayan,
Hmm.
just my favorite. He's kind of like the blues Indian guy to me.
Okay. Okay.
In any case, I mean, what I hear in Indian music, I just can't fathom it.
So you should definitely come down to India then. We would love to have you
Yeah.
here.
Hmm.
We're looking
Yeah,
forward to that.
I want to go. I've never been, and I do want to go. So maybe toward the end of this year, you know, as I
Hmm.
say, we're moving to Paris,
Right.
and also I'm going to be in Dubai doing something, I believe, in October. So maybe we'll just go to India, you know, from Dubai.
Yeah, that'd
I'd
be
love
fun.
to. Yeah.
That'd be fun. We'd love to have you here. So now we will sort of move on to like a very interesting segment of today. It's called the rapid fire segment, all right? So I'm gonna shoot across 5 questions, and you gotta answer them really, real quick. Okay?
Okay.
What is your favorite guilty pleasure song?
Song?
Uh-huh.
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Wow, that's a huge name. What is your idea of an all-star blues band, and who would be there in the band, in the all-star blues band? Yeah.
Blues band? Wow.
Hmm.
That's a tough one because, you know, most of them are gone. You mean living or?
It can be from any generation, any era for that matter.
Oh, well, I would say B.B. King's band from the mid 60s.
Hmm.
um, Sonny Freeman was the drummer.
Hmm.
Duke Jethro was on organ.
Okay.
Uh, and, you know, there was no bass guitar. It was organ, like organ, you know, trio. And he had two
Hmm.
horn players. I remember Kenneth Sands was on the saxophone. I don't remember the trumpet player's name.
Okay.
But I like that, you know, boy, I saw that band live, you know,
Hmm.
in the mid 60s. And, uh, you know, it's like top 5 concerts of my life, you know. So these guys are on, no one knows who they are.
What is that one song that always makes you cry?
Mm. There's a song by, performed by a Latin singer. I think he's from Brazil.
Hmm.
The song is, his name is Caetano Veloso,
Okay.
and the song is called Lamento Borincano.
All right.
And wow, that is a beautiful thing.
Okay. What was your favorite sport while growing up?
Baseball.
All right. You still do follow baseball?
Yeah.
You do? That's great.
Every year, yeah.
One last one. What would you be if you could be other things apart from being a musician?
Well, I love the arts, you know. Uh, I would have answered that question differently at another time. But, you know, I'm also very interested in Qigong and Tai Chi. I
Oh,
study.
wow. Oh,
And, you know, quite honestly, this is where my mind is, you know, now is, you know, on internal yoga, you know.
mhm.
In the past, I would have said that I would have liked to have helped other people solve their problems. In other words, it's like there are people who consult businesses. They come in and they show them what's not working, and they help them figure out how to fix those problems, and so that everything can run smoothly. That's what I would have said at one time.
Wonderful.
So basically, peace, harmony. I'm looking for these things.
Lovely. Mr. Ford, down in the distant horizon, how would you want to be remembered as?
Well, a nice guy.
That's a great
That's
answer.
my answer.
All right. Okay. Now, I would like to take some questions. A lot of them have been asking a couple of interesting questions on the feed.
Okay, I only have a couple of minutes, and I'll have to go.
Sure, certainly,
Okay.
certainly. So we just take like a few questions and then we'll be done. Yeah. A lot of them want you to come down to India real soon on the feed. Mr. Nurani says something about your record with Joe. Your record with Joe Derio was awesome. That's what he says.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. That's a very long time ago, and I remember the session. I remember that I wrote one thing for the record, and Joe was an amazing player.
Right. What city in Paris are you going to?
Paris. My girlfriend and I, we just spent a month in France. Okay. And most of that time we spent in Paris. We went down to the south, and we were in Nice. We looked around down there. But we both agreed, if we're going to be living in France, we're going to be living in Paris. That's where the action is. There's such a beautiful place, man. Such an incredible city.
Okay. Someone else says, do you still own the Fender Esprit? If not, what happened to it?
Well, the original one, the first one that I played for about 9 years, I sold that guitar.
Okay.
And because I wanted to buy a Les Paul, and I wanted to start playing Les Pauls, the guitar was very bright. It was, I think, maple, and it had a spruce top and an ebony fretboard. It was very bright. And I started wanting to hear a darker sound. And and I also really like vintage guitars. And so indeed, I was able to sell that and buy, something that I might not otherwise be able to buy, because vintage guitars are very expensive,
Sure. Shebal Zaveri from India says, please release live footage with Jingchi.
There is none. There's no live footage of Jingchi. Thank you for that. I mean, I'm a big fan of that band. That's something that I really enjoyed. I'm really proud of those records. Some really good writing, some great music on those records.
Great. So in the interest of time, I'd like to conclude the session. Before we go, this interview is also going to be aired on Big FM Shillong and Big FM Azol. So would you have like a closing note for the people who are going to be listening to this interview on radio?
Well, it's a privilege to be able to address, so many people. And I really appreciate being here with you. I hope people will certainly check out the music if they haven't heard it before.
Certainly.
Yeah. Excuse me. especially on my most recent record, Pure.
Mhm.
And also, if people really, really like a particular artist or musician, please buy their music and don't
Sure.
just stream it, because artists don't get paid anymore for music, and they have to spend money to make it. So I hope you don't mind my adding that to this moment. Wow, it's always wonderful to be able to share, with others.
Sure. Well, that being said, thank you so much for tuning in and having given me this privilege of interviewing you. Please do stay in touch. We'd love to have you in India. I'd love to host you in India as well. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.